Think medieval castles were just boring old stone fortresses? Think again. These ancient strongholds hide 10 mind-blowing secrets that will change everything you thought you knew. The lords and ladies who lived in castles wanted comfort just as much as protection. While the outer walls were all business with arrow slits and murder holes, the inner chambers were a world of color and luxury. Walls that look bare today were once covered in vibrant painted scenes with reds, blues, and golds. Comfort was key for these medieval elites. Their floors featured imported fancy tiles from across Europe, creating beautiful patterns. The finest castles had glass windows when glass cost more than gold by weight. Most regular folks had to choose between freezing with open windows or suffocating with wooden shutters. Meanwhile, castle dwellers were basically living in medieval greenhouses. Those massive fireplaces you see in castle ruins could burn entire trees and were kept going day and night during winter. Enormous tapestries hung on walls weren't just decorative, they were medieval insulation, keeping drafts at bay in rooms big enough to fit 3 modern houses. The Great Hall hosted everything from royal feasts to legal proceedings. Tables could stretch nearly 100 feet, with strict seating arrangements where moving one seat closer to the lord was considered a major promotion. Nothing says I'm royalty quite like trying to enjoy your expensive imported wine while dodging dive-bombing pigeons that flew in through the smoke holes. Even the most luxurious castles never forgot their military purpose. Beautiful arched windows were set high enough that arrows couldn't easily fly in. Decorative carvings often hid defensive features. Even dining arrangements were strategic. Trusted advisors sat with their backs to walls, while suspicious guests were placed where they could be watched. Castle builders were really smart about mixing deadly useful features with showing off luxury everywhere. And these clever designs were in every corner of these amazing buildings, including some surprising building tricks that helped the people inside win fights. Ever wonder why castle staircases always make you dizzy? It wasn't just bad medieval architecture, it was medieval battle strategy at its finest. Look at any old castle spiral staircase and you'll notice they almost always twist clockwise going up. This wasn't random, it was a fighting hack. Since most attackers were right-handed, this design forced them to fight with their sword arm squished against the center column. Their sword swings ended up about as effective as trying to do karate in a phone booth. Meanwhile, defenders coming down the stairs had their right arms on the outside of the spiral with plenty of room to swing. Home field advantage has never been so literal. Some castles took this sneakiness even further. They built steps of slightly different heights throughout the same staircase. The people who lived there knew exactly which steps were wonky, but invaders didn't. One wrong step, and you'd tumble down the stairs faster than a medieval knight after 8 cups of mead. The original trip advisor was actually a castle architect. In Conway Castle in Wales, you can still see worn spots on the spiral stairs where people have stepped in the exact same safe places for over 700 years. That's the world's oldest continuous watch your step warning. The really clever bit, some castles had a few special staircases that turned the opposite way, counterclockwise. These were built specifically for left-handed defenders. About 1 in 10 medieval knights were lefties, just like today. Left-handed fighters were sometimes especially valued in castle defense, medieval warfare's first southpaw advantage long before baseball existed. These twisted staircases weren't just architectural features, they were built-in weapons that could mean the difference between life and death. While these sneaky stairs kept unwanted visitors from getting in, the castle walls themselves held another secret. Thick walls did more than just protect castles, they often hid secret chambers that few people knew about. Castle walls could be up to 12 feet thick, with plenty of space to hide entire rooms between the inner and outer stone faces. Finding the entrances was nearly impossible, unless you knew the secret. Some opened when you pulled a certain candle holder or touched a specific stone. Others hid behind moving wooden panels that looked like normal wall decorations. In one famous castle in Europe, a hidden passage connected to caves that brought in food during attacks, which explained why the defenders never ran out of supplies. These hidden spaces served different jobs around the castle. Many were escape routes with tunnels leading outside to safety when unwanted guests showed up without warning. Castle owners suddenly remembered urgent business requiring the secret exit tunnel. Some chambers were listening spots where castle lords could hear what visitors said when they thought nobody was around. Tiny holes and decorative wall carvings let sound travel to hidden rooms where someone could listen to every word. Hidden treasure rooms were very common. When danger came, gold coins and jewels would disappear into wall spaces that looked like solid stone from outside. These hiding spots worked so well that some treasures stayed lost for hundreds of years. A person fixing an old castle wall in France found 400 gold coins worth over $900,000 that had been hidden since the 1600s. The darkest secret rooms were prison cells called oubliettes, from a word meaning to forget, because once someone went in, they were meant to be forgotten forever. These were often small spaces under trapdoors where prisoners could be dropped and abandoned. Medieval castle builders knew how to keep secrets. They created the first private chat rooms centuries before the internet existed. Modern tools like radar still find new hidden rooms in old castles today, proving that many secrets remain undiscovered after hundreds of years. While these hidden spaces kept private things private, some castle features did the exact opposite. These medieval bathrooms were usually small rooms jutting out from castle walls with everything dropping straight down through chutes to whatever was below, often the moat or just the ground. No toilet paper existed back then. Wealthy folk used wool or hemp, while others used leaves, moss, or their left hand. Medieval bathroom etiquette was simple: left hand for wiping, right hand for eating, and both hands for praying. Nothing splashed back up at Doe Castle. Some garderobes emptied into a central shaft, dropping 60 feet into the ground. Castle designers tried to make things less smelly by placing toilets on the windy sides of castles. Some even had tiny windows for airflow. You know your plumbing is bad when your bathroom design depends on good weather. The truly bizarre part: garderobe actually means clothes guard because people stored their fancy clothes in these stinky bathroom spaces. They believed the awful smell would keep moths away from their expensive fabrics. Medieval fashion tip: if your outfit smells worse than the outhouse, you're doing formal wear correctly. During battles, these toilet chutes became a surprising weak point. Enemies sometimes climbed up the waste chutes to sneak into castles during sieges. Imagine wanting to conquer a castle so badly you would climb through centuries of toilet waste. Talk about dedicated warriors. Long sieges created major bathroom problems with hundreds of people trapped inside for months. Garderobes would overflow. During the siege of Chateau Gaillard in 1204, defenders had to throw out the weakest people because they couldn't handle the waste situation. Waste dropped into a chute that opened outside the wall, often onto unsuspecting people. In medieval times, heads up wasn't just a friendly warning. It was survival advice when walking near castle walls. While castle toilet technology was pretty basic, at least their defensive entrances were much more advanced. Some drawbridges weren't just lifted, they were rigged to collapse on purpose. While most castle bridges simply went up and down, clever medieval engineers designed special trap drawbridges with sections that could suddenly drop away. When enemy soldiers rushed across what looked like a normal bridge, defenders would pull hidden levers or cut ropes, and surprise, the middle would fall out. Nothing ruins a knight's day quite like the bridge disappearing beneath his feet mid-charge. At Caerphilly Castle, evidence shows their trap bridge could collapse in less than 2 seconds, barely enough time to say "oh no" before splashing into the moat. Other castles had tilt bridges that worked like giant seesaws, suddenly pivoting to slide attackers off into the water or onto spikes below. Medieval engineers basically invented the slip and slide, except theirs ended with spears instead of a pool. The real genius came when these trap bridges were combined with portcullises, those heavy spiked gates that dropped down from above. Attackers would charge across the bridge, then the portcullis would slam down behind them, trapping them between gates. At the same time, the bridge might collapse, cutting off their retreat. Once trapped in this murder box, defenders had plenty of options for dealing with the unwelcome guests. Arrow slits and holes in the ceiling let them shoot arrows or pour down boiling water, heated sand, or burning oil. It was like a deadly game show where getting eliminated was extremely literal. Harlech Castle took this to the extreme with 6 different obstacles protecting its entrance. Multiple drawbridges, portcullises, and doors created a deadly obstacle course for attackers. While these clever bridges protected the front door with moving parts and sudden drops, the moats surrounding many castles weren't just filled with water. Creating a water moat meant finding a water source, building systems to keep it flowing, and dealing with freezing, flooding, and algae. That's a lot of work just to make a big puddle around your home. The cheaper option? Digging a ditch and filling it with all sorts of nasty surprises. Many dry moats contained wooden stakes pointing upward, thorn bushes, and caltrops, 4-pointed metal spikes that always landed with one point facing up. Medieval castle designers took "keep off the lawn" signs to a whole new level. The truly gross moats combined these obstacles with castle waste. Without proper plumbing, many castles dumped their garbage and sewage into the moat. The only thing worse than falling into a pit of spikes was falling into a pit of spikes covered in last week's rotten cabbage soup and toilet contents. In wartime, defenders added animal bones to dry moats. These weren't for decoration. Broken bones could create surprisingly sharp edges. One Middle Eastern fortress reportedly filled its moat with snakes, which might just be the earliest recorded case of extreme home security. The smell from these garbage-filled moats created another defense layer. Approaching armies would smell the castle long before seeing it. In medieval times, falling into the moat wasn't just dangerous, it meant you'd need at least 3 baths before anyone would sit next to you again. Birds and rats loved these garbage moats, creating yet another problem for attackers. Imagine trying to look fierce while fighting off rats climbing up your armor. Archaeological digs at castle sites have found thousands of items in old moats, weapons, pottery, jewelry, and sometimes human remains. One English castle moat contained over 2,000 everyday objects, proving that medieval people threw away just as much junk as we do. Dry moats were also easier to maintain than water-filled ones. They didn't flood fields during rains or freeze solid during winter. For practical castle owners, a good garbage-filled dry moat was the medieval version of affordable home security. While these stinky moats kept enemies at a distance, the stone castle walls themselves held even more secrets. Stone corridors often created natural echo chambers that made castles into medieval surveillance systems. In many castles, whispers from one tower could travel clearly to another corner, thanks to the way sound bounced off curved stone walls. Round rooms were especially tricky. Words whispered on one side could be heard perfectly on the opposite wall, but not in the middle. Castle architects were basically creating medieval wiretaps before phones even existed. These acoustic features weren't just happy accidents. Some castle builders deliberately created whispering galleries where sound traveled in surprising ways. At Bodiam Castle, the Great Hall was designed so the Lord could eavesdrop on visitors at the entrance gate. He could hear what people said about him before they knew he was listening. Medieval social media monitoring at its finest. Servants quickly figured out these sound tricks and used them for gossip gathering. The first information leaks weren't on computers. They were servants standing in the right corner of a stone hallway. Many castles had small air shafts or channels running between rooms. These were officially for ventilation, but they also carried conversations from one room to another like stone speakerphones. At Carisbrooke Castle, tiny passages connected the main meeting room to a private chamber, perfect for secret listening. Smart castle dwellers developed counter-espionage techniques. They played music, ran fountains, or hung thick tapestries to break up sound waves. Others held important meetings outdoors where stone couldn't betray their words. The craftiest nobles used these acoustic tricks to spread false information. They'd stage private conversations near spots where they knew sound would travel to certain ears. Medieval fake news didn't need printing presses, just strategically placed whispers in echo-friendly corners. The phrase, "walls have ears," wasn't just a saying in medieval times. In stone castles, it was literally true. But those walls weren't just hiding sounds. Location was everything when building a castle. Good spots were usually high ground with great views that had been valued for hundreds or even thousands of years. This meant many castle builders weren't the first people to use these prime locations, and sometimes they built right on top of very old burial grounds. Building on older sacred sites wasn't just coincidence. It sent a powerful message about the new ruler taking over everything, including the important places of the past. It also saved a lot of work. Why level a new hilltop when there's already a flat area that someone else prepared? Ireland's Leap Castle sits on land that was used for ceremonies and burials long before the castle existed. During renovations in the 1900s, workers discovered an underground pit filled with countless human skeletons. This wasn't a normal burial. Many of the bones showed signs of being stabbed with spikes. The castle itself had been built directly over this mass grave. When the real estate agent said the place had lots of character, they weren't kidding. At Edinburgh Castle in Scotland, archaeologists found evidence of people living and burying their dead on the castle rock at least 3,000 years before the current castle was built. The builders of the medieval castle knew they were on old sacred ground, but built there anyway. Castle dungeons often had creepy connections to death. To save effort, castle builders would sometimes convert existing crypts or tombs into prison cells. The dungeon at Chillingham Castle was originally built as a mass grave for plague victims, then later turned into a place to hold prisoners. Talk about a room with bad energy. First you die of plague there, then they lock people up in your burial spot. Many castles had their own burial crypts right below the main floors. Glamis Castle in Scotland has an underground crypt where generations of the same family were laid to rest, with the living relatives walking and dancing on the floors directly above. At mealtimes, the dining hall would be full of noise and laughter, while just a few feet below, dozens of ancestors lay in silent tombs. Some castle chapels were built with thin walls separating the prayer area from burial chambers. The idea was that the dead could hear the prayers being said for them. A few castles even had small openings between the chapel and the crypts so that the smell of incense could reach the dead. Medieval air fresheners had a lot of work to do in those situations. Castle ghost stories often connect to these burial grounds. When Dover Castle expanded in the 1200s, workers disturbed ancient Saxon burials. According to castle records, workers refused to continue until proper reburials were arranged because they claimed to see figures walking the site at night. The medieval mind didn't separate the living world from the dead as much as we do today. Having ancestors buried nearby was seen as protection, not something creepy. Castle dwellers viewed these burials as a way to claim the power and history of a place. While human remains might have stayed quietly in the walls and under the floors, other living creatures had free run of medieval castles. Some welcome, and some definitely not. These medieval fortresses might have housed kings and queens, but rats ruled the spaces between walls and under floors. A single castle could house thousands of rats in its nooks and crannies. While the lord of the castle might claim to own everything inside the walls, the rats held the real majority vote. Castle kitchens were rat paradise, with food prepared in massive quantities and scraps often tossed aside. Rats enjoyed an endless buffet. Medieval rats didn't need to make restaurant reservations, they just showed up to the kitchen and seated themselves. The castle design made controlling rats nearly impossible. Stone walls had countless gaps where rats could slip through, and floors had spaces between boards where they could travel unseen. Rats basically had their own secret highway system within the walls, while humans had to use the stairs like suckers. Castle dwellers tried everything to control these pests. Cats were the most common solution, with many castles employing dozens of felines as rat hunters. Records from the Tower of London show they once had an official yeoman warder of the cats. The original pest control specialists got paid in room, board, and leftover fish heads, the medieval equivalent of an unpaid internship with free snacks. Some castles used ferrets or even kept owls inside to hunt rats that came out at night. Medieval pest control was basically assembling a tiny animal avengers team to fight rodent crime. Yet despite all these predators, the rats always won. Their ability to reproduce quickly, a single pair can have up to 2,000 descendants in 1 year, meant they couldn't be eliminated. Some castle owners paid servants for each rat tail turned in, creating a medieval bounty system. Medieval resume skills often included expert rat hunter, alongside sword polishing and banner waving. The funniest rat stories come from formal events. One French king reportedly threw his crown at a rat during his coronation dinner, missing the rat, but hitting an important bishop instead. The rat escaped unharmed, while the bishop went home with a royal headache and a story nobody would believe. While rats were unwelcome visitors, castle owners sometimes voluntarily brought in even stranger animals to impress their guests. Nobles collected exotic animals to show off their wealth and power. And many of these creatures lived right inside the castle walls. Many royal castles housed lions. One fortress kept a chained bear in the courtyard. Lions, leopards, and monkeys weren't just for outdoor display. Many lived in special chambers inside castles. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep with a lion roaring in the next room. That beats having noisy neighbors with a loud TV. One royal kept a pet cheetah that roamed freely through her chambers. The castle staff lived in constant fear of turning corners, never knowing when they might face the speedy predator. Several records mention visitors refusing to stay overnight when they learned about the castle's unusual residents. Birds were especially popular castle pets. Eagles and falcons lived in special chambers called mews. Peacocks strutted around castle grounds, and their colorful feathers decorated great halls. Peacocks were cooked and re-feathered before serving, purely for drama. Medieval dining involved more arts and crafts than eating. The truly rich went beyond ordinary exotic animals. Records mention a European ruler who kept a giraffe in his castle. Another royal received an elephant as a gift and built a special structure to house it. Unfortunately, the elephant died after just 2 years. Medieval Europe wasn't ideal for African wildlife. Monkeys often served as pets for noble ladies. Larger primates like baboons might be kept chained in the Great Hall as conversation pieces. One castle had a baboon that learned to mimic the castle priest's blessing movements, causing quite a scandal. Some castles even kept crocodiles in special chambers with water pools. The castle tour guide job was a lot more exciting back then. And on your left is the royal throne room, and on your right, a giant man-eating reptile from the Nile. These exotic animals needed special care. Some castles had dedicated staff just for feeding and maintaining the menagerie. Food for meat-eating animals was particularly challenging in winter, making exotic pets extremely expensive to keep. From hidden rooms to clever defenses, from ghostly burials to exotic animals, medieval castles were far more than just stone fortresses. They were complex worlds filled with surprising secrets that made them the most fascinating buildings of their time.